It seems like every single year we have at least one NBA team that surprises us all and completely blows us out of the water as far as expectations go. In my opinion, the single biggest team that did that last year was the New York Knicks, although I will also give credit to the Charlotte Hornets. But in my opinion, going into next season, there's two teams that are in, I wouldn't say criminally underrated, but are definitely going to be underrated going into next season and could definitely surprise us all and surpass expectations. But before we get into it, welcome back to Jump Ball, your new daily dose of NBA news and opinions. I'm your host, Sam Conrad. Let's get into today's episode. So, the first team that I'm going to be talking about is going to be the Minnesota Timberwolves. There's a good amount to cover here, but honestly, I've talked a little bit about these players already, so I won't try to go too in depth. But overall, this team honestly has all the talent in the world to be successful, but they continue to go through injuries. I said back on April 29th that if this team suffered no major injuries, that they would probably at least at the minimum be a ninth seed in the Western Conference. While some people say that's not a hot take, I personally still think that it is, because a lot of people really doubt this team, just because they look at things on a surface level. They look at the statistics and they look at standings, but they don't really pay attention to players' health, play style, coaching, anything like that. And overall, that just kind of leads to a little bit of misinformation or some uninformed opinions overall in the NBA. So let's take a little bit more of an in-depth look, I guess, at this team. They have a crap ton of offense, just looking at their starting five. They have D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Karl Anthony Towns. Now, if you do look at these guys' statistics on a surface level, you will see, oh my gosh, these guys almost all averaged like 20 points a game last season. I think Anthony Edwards averaged 18, Malik Beasley averaged 19, D'Angelo Russell averaged 19, and I think Karl Anthony Towns averaged like 20 or 21, maybe a little bit more. Regardless, it's four guys that almost scored 20 points a game. Holy cow, that is absolutely insane. That's already 80 points a game right there. And then you still have a solid five guys off the bench, four, five, six guys off the bench, providing you a little bit of offense. My dryer just went off. Well, moving on. Well, that's not completely true, because they've all suffered through injuries or at least missed time last season. So their statistics do look a little bit better than they will look next season. D'Angelo Russell missed, I believe, like 20 games last season. Karl Anthony Towns missed something like 20 or 30 games last season. And Malik Beasley missed almost, not even almost, over half the season due to some off the court issues, and a little bit of a suspension that, of course, did lead to him missing time, meaning that all of these guys didn't play at once, meaning they all had more opportunities in the games that they did play, further kind of boosting their statistics, right? So offensively, they will be good, but they may not be quite as great as some people may be thinking, because they're just looking once again at the statistics on a surface level. But overall, this team is still going to be pretty good. You have D'Angelo Russell as your point guard, who's overall a really good scorer, has a nice handle on the ball, an elite mid-range scorer, honestly, very underrated in that opinion. His three-point percentage continues to improve as time goes on. And overall, pretty solid as far as getting a bucket goes. And he can, I guess, run your offense a little bit. I wouldn't want him to be doing that, but he's really the best option that this team has at doing that. So you kind of got to put him in that role regardless. I've already talked about Malik Beasley. I'm not going to go over it too much, but an elite off-ball three-point shooting talent that pretty much any team in the NBA could use. A very, very, very valuable piece that you need in order to succeed in today's NBA. You have Anthony Edwards, who, in my opinion, has had his ups and downs. I'm not the highest on him, but I will talk about him a little bit more in depth later. You have Jaden McDaniels at the 4, who really is a phenomenal power forward for this team, kind of a 3-and-D wing of sorts, but not necessarily, right? He can, of course, space the floor, which is great for this team. I think that not even just great for this team, but just great in general. That is what you need, once again, to succeed in the NBA. He plays some really nice defense, kind of on the perimeter, but especially on the interior. While he won't be, of course, banging it down low with some of the elite big men, he will be contesting and blocking shots, because he just has some really, really, really great awareness around the rim. And then, of course, you have Karl Anthony Towns, who is one of the best offensive big men that we really honestly kind of ever seen. An elite three-point shooter for basically anybody's expectations in the NBA, guards, wings, or centers. Can score from the mid-range, can attack the baskets, great post moves, good in transition, super well-rounded offensively. But then off the bench, they're solving one of their bigger issues, which is defense. D'Angelo Russell, atrocious defender. Malik Beasley, really bad defender. Karl Anthony Towns has obviously been criticized for his defense many times over the years. Anthony Edwards, honestly, kind of just like a net zero on the defensive side of the ball. He had his good moments and his bad. I don't think he's terrible on that side of the ball whatsoever, but he's not elite. Jaden McDaniels is solid. But overall, if you look at the starting five, you don't look at them as a defensive rotation. However, off of the bench, they do have some pretty good players. Patrick Beverley, while I do think he's a bit overrated, is kind of that thorn in your side type of player that really is going to get into your head, cause you to get into your head, and overall kind of mess you up as far as from a mental state goes. Josh Okogie, he can't do anything on the offensive side of the ball, but he is a pretty good defender, or actually not even pretty good. In my opinion, he's a very good defender. Can guard the 1 through 3, sometimes the 4 if you really have to put him there, and does a very good job at doing so. Taurean Prince, good defender, can also space the floor a little bit. Jared Vanderbilt, you feel for the guy. You hope that he at least has a little bit more left in the tank, a little bit more room to grow. Although obviously we really haven't seen any of that in recent memory, but he is a pretty solid defender. So once again, he's just bringing something to the table that this team needs. And then Naz Reid, a very underrated player, in my opinion, overall, really can get you buckets off of the bench. A pretty underrated big man. He's not very good defensively. So people kind of, in my opinion, he's a bit outshined by Karl-Anthony Towns, and people kind of underrate how good he is off of the bench for this team. So overall, they're not that bad. They're not that great either, although if we're being completely honest, but they seem to have fixed or at least addressed one of their biggest issues last season, which was defense. Now, of course, the biggest issue going forward will be injuries, but if all goes well and they don't suffer injuries, this team should be very good. This team normally has a win rate of like 33%. They win 1/3 of their games. When D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns are healthy, which I believe has only been about 23 games, it sounds like, they are 13-10. Now, D'Angelo Russell was traded to this team a long time ago. There have been a lot more than 23 games since then, but in the 23 games that they did play together, this team was 23-10, which is very, very good. I know it's not phenomenal. This team is not a contender when the two of them are playing, but being over 500 is great for a team that is normally only winning 1/3 of their games. And to further add on to this subject, at the end of last season, a lot of their guys were finally healthy, and they finally had kind of like a full rotation of guys back: Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, and Karl-Anthony Towns. And during this last month, from April 16th to May 16th of 2021, this team was 9-7. Once again, it's not amazing, but it is over 500, and that is a very good sign for things to come. Now, the final thing that I want to say here, actually, before I move on to that, I did say I would go back to Anthony Edwards. I have my doubts about him. He was very atrocious to start the year, just incredibly inefficient. But then, of course, during the second half of the year, he was incredibly efficient. He's kind of inconsistent on the offensive side of the ball and kind of tries to play hero ball, taking too many shots that I don't really think that he should, which isn't very good for this team. But he is an athletic monster, meaning he has all the potential in the world. He is built like a football player. And overall, he at least can shoot 3-point shots, a little bit of the mid-range shots, and he's a phenomenal guy attacking the basket. If he does take a couple of steps up, he doesn't necessarily have to be the second best player on this team, but if he can be a really, really good third option, which I do think he can, that is going to be huge, huge for this team going forward. The final thing I want to say is their head coaching situation. Ryan Saunders was just not the guy for them. It was a mess. I'm just going to leave it at that. It was a mess, but they recently decided that they're going to be going forward with Chris Finch as their head coach. And I didn't know too much about him, so I did a little bit of research, but overall, some of the stuff that I've been hearing has made me feel pretty good about this team but mainly because what he says right here. Finch says the Wolves are going to play fast, play free. Whoops, I did not mean to click on that tweet. They're going to play fast and play free. I don't really care about playing free, but playing fast is huge. I think in order to succeed in the NBA, you have to be a really fast-paced 3-point shooting team if you want to be like on top of the conference, but especially the playing fast part of it, right? And in my opinion, when you have guys like Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, D'Angelo Russell even, and Karl-Anthony Towns, guys that are pretty good in transition, playing fast is going to be very, 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 very beneficial for you going forward. So I'm very excited to see the offensive sets that Chris Finch can come up with for this team. And I think it's really going to benefit them greatly. Now, what teams do I think that they can be better than next season? What would make them a shocking team of sorts in the NBA? First of all, let's switch conferences. There we go. So this team was the 13th seed, quote unquote, the 13th seed in the Western Conference last season. And I think that they will be much better than that next year, because I think that for sure they will be better if this team can stay healthy. Of course, this team will be better than the Houston Rockets, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Sacramento Kings, the Dallas Mavericks, and the San Antonio Spurs without a doubt. That would at least make them the 10th seed in the Western Conference. Then I think that there's also 3 teams that they could be better than, but there's not really like a guarantee, like I'm kind of saying that the other 5 teams would be. I think that they have the potential to be better than the New Orleans Pelicans, potentially the Portland Trailblazers due to health concerns, and of course, if Damian Lillard gets traded or not, and the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies is definitely a question mark for me. I think that the 2 of them are kind of a coin flip, but regardless, those 2 teams, at the very least, the Pelicans and the Trailblazers, if they are better than them, that means that they are at least an 8th seed and that they are at least in the quote unquote playoffs if there wasn't a plan going forward, which is phenomenal. Because the last time that this team made the playoffs was, I think, 2017 with Jimmy Butler, and he just carried them to that playoff appearance. And before that, I don't think that they'd made a playoff appearance in like double-digit years. I think it was 10 years or 9 years or 13 years or something crazy like that. Regardless, it had been a long time. This team has not seen really any success whatsoever over the course of just the past decade. And if they can at least even make the playoffs this season, that is a massive improvement, and in my opinion, would shock us all as NBA fans. Now, excuse me. Now, moving on to the second team, it is my Indiana Pacers. I don't want to talk about them too much. I've talked about them so much in just the past 2 videos, and I feel ridiculous for making an entire video basically dedicated to them. But I think that this team is underrated, and it's not just because of my team. They're in a very similar situation as the Minnesota Timberwolves, where they've just dealt with the injury bug for a couple of years. A couple of years ago, Victor Oladipo got injured for most of the season. Domantas Sabonis got injured right before the NBA bubble. Miles Turner and TJ Warren were out for most of this season, and Karis LeVert got some mass on his kidney right as he was traded, meaning that we didn't get him as much as we would have liked to have him throughout the course of last season, right? So overall, we do not have some of our best players, or did not have some of our best players for most of the season last year. And when we did, we were the 4th or 5th best team in the Eastern Conference. And that was before Karis LeVert joined the team and before we made some nice, in my opinion, picks in the draft. Real quick coverage over this team. Malcolm Brogdon, really good, efficient scorer, can kind of score from anywhere on the floor, not necessarily the mid-range. He's not the strongest mid-range scorer, but he is at least willing to take a couple of those shots. Really good at running the offense. Karis LeVert, bucket getter. That's all I have to say. TJ Warren has been our main scoring option really for the past couple of seasons, but I do expect that role to be handed over to Sabonis, obviously, because he continues to just get better and better. But TJ Warren, I think he can easily average like 15 points a game, very efficient manner. Also providing us with some solid defense. Not great, not bad, but kind of like Anthony Edwards being just like a net 0, a net average. Domantas Sabonis, the quote-unquote star for our team, just continues to get better, is becoming, in my opinion, more and more athletic as time goes on, just dominating other players in the post and in transition. He's great. I love Sabonis. That's all I'm going to say. And then finally, we have Miles Turner, who is really kind of the heart and soul of our defense. He's really the guy that holds it all together for us because his elite rim protection makes it hard, or at least uneasy for opposing players to attack the basket because they know that he's going to be there and it's going to be very hard to get a shot in around him. Off the bench, TJ McConnell, I've talked about him enough. Great defensive player and also can run the offense for us off of the bench. Jeremy Lamb, great 3-point shooter. Justin Holiday, great 3-point shooter and defender. Chris Duarte, hopefully, I mean, we haven't really seen him play enough games at an NBA level, but hopefully a great 3-point shooter and looks to be a kind of a net average, a net 0 as well defensively. The one thing I will say about Chris Duarte is I'm glad that we drafted him because he is a win now prospect. He was the oldest guy in the draft. And if you did draft him, you know for a fact it was a win now move. And then a couple of other pieces off the bench, Isaiah Jackson and Goga Bitadze. I've heard good things. I'm pretty excited, especially about Jackson, because I think going forward, he could be a really nice defensive piece for us. And I'm a guy that loves defense. So kind of makes sense right there. But the biggest concern, in my opinion, for the team is strictly their hiring of Rick Carlisle. I am not a fan of this move whatsoever. I do think it's better than Nate Bjorken. I think that's how you say I think that's how you said his name. I'm honestly not completely sure because I kept messing it up. But excuse me. But we had a lot of trouble with Nate Bjorken last year, but I don't think that Rick Carlisle is going to be that much better. I think he'll be able to maintain better relationships with the players. But something I mentioned when talking about the Timberwolves was a fast-paced offense. Rick Carlisle is the complete opposite of running a fast-paced offense. Last year with the Dallas Mavericks, 25th in pace. The season prior, let's take a look. The Dallas Mavericks, 18th. The season prior, in 2018 through 19, Dallas Mavericks, 19th. Season before that, the team, I believe they're 27th. And the season before that, whoops, hang on. The season before that, the team is 29th. As you can see, he runs a very slow-paced offensive game. And also kind of, in my opinion, when you have guys like Karis LeVert, Miles Turner, Domantas Sabonis, I guess you could say TJ Warren is in that conversation as well. Guys that are pretty good in transition, running a fast-paced offense would be very, 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 very beneficial for you. And if Rick Carlisle doesn't do that, I don't think it's going to be great for this team. Overall, my expectations for the Pacers, I think that we could probably be 5th seed in the Eastern Conference, which is kind of, in my opinion, surprising because there's 5 pretty good teams in the Eastern Conference this year. Brooklyn Nets, Milwaukee Bucks, Miami Heat, Philadelphia 76ers, and the Boston Celtics, meaning I think that our team could be better than one of those teams. Yeah, so I don't really have too much to say there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree with anything that I said today, and I will see you tomorrow on Jump Ball. Thank you very much.